All right, so welcome back to the Redacted Culture Cast. We are talking with somebody here. We have a guest who has experience as well as trains in ECQC. Now, that is a term that has been a bit of a buzzword for a while. You kind of see it in the development of training, but I'd like you to introduce yourself.
My name is Ruben Alverez. What can I say? I'm a full-time law enforcement officer down in South Florida. I'm on a full-time TAC team and Jiu Jitsu black belt. Been doing Jiu Jitsu since I was a teenager and did it in the professional levels. And then, my time in law enforcement, I saw that, Jiu Jitsu wasn't, the end-all be-all for law enforcement. So I ended up training with Craig Douglas at ShivWorks in ECQC, which is Extreme Close Quarter Concepts. So that's a little bit about me.
So we're going to have to go into the differences between ECQC and Jiu-Jitsu, particularly because is from where you've been at in the world, is Jiu-Jitsu kind of like the Navy SEAL CrossFit vegan thing where like anyone who does Jiu-Jitsu tells you that they do Jiu-Jitsu kind of thing?
So you have like two types of people in jiu-jitsu. You have the guys that are like quiet about not doing jiu-jitsu, and then you have the guys that all they do is talk about jiu-jitsu. They wear the shirts, they wear the hats, like the whole CrossFit culture thing where it's like the first rule is you do not shut up about it.
Oh, yeah.
So you have those two sides of the jiu-jitsu peeps. The only way that people ask me if I do jiu-jitsu is because I have, the cauliflower ears. So they'll either come up and be like, you fight MMA, you do wrestling, or you do jiu-jitsu.
Fair. No, I mean, it is a bit of a giveaway.
Mm-hmm.
They say. I remember when I think it was a team leader or something like that was like, you do not mess with this guy because he's got the ear. And I grew up in rural Minnesota, so I had no idea what cauliflower ear was. I had just no real experience of it. And so when I met someone who had it in their like early 20s, yeah, we all learned pretty quick. So let's jump right in then. Before we do, the show is sponsored. Now, I'm very excited to announce the first official sponsor of the Redacted Culture Cast. Obsidian Arms is one of those companies that reflects the many facets of gun culture. Not only are their firearms frequently found on competition fields like USPSA and 3-Gun, but they are a Minnesota-based, US-sourced original equipment manufacturer. Obsidian Arms makes their own punch and tool kits for the amateur and professional gunsmith out of Little Canada, Minnesota, that come with a lifetime warranty. Whether it is fine parts that require a Swiss machine, or you're in the design phase and are looking for an American machine shop that is in tune with the needs of gun culture, go check out Obsidian Arms at obsidianarms.com. Thank you. And now back to the show. All right, so Ruben, you started with we started talking about a difference between ECQC, which is extreme close quarters concepts, and jiu-jitsu. What is the primary difference there?
So ECQC is basically grappling or a weapon-based entanglement. So it's primarily based off of weapons and tools. It could also be unarmed, opposition, but it's going over concepts of, hey, task versus priority on prioritizing, accessing weapon systems or preventing your opponent or adversary from accessing their weapons. So a little bit difference is we don't really like to go to the ground. We don't want to fight on the ground too much, especially in a law enforcement capacity or a military capacity, because you're kitted up. You have helmets, you have gear, you have rifles. So fighting with gear on is not like traditional jiu-jitsu where you just wear shorts and a rash guard if it's no gi, or a kimono or a gi when you're doing the pajama party. So you often see that in jiu-jitsu it's more of a submission based, or getting to a position, but sometimes that position you are dominant, but if it's a weapon-based entanglement, you could easily access a firearm or a knife while being put into a bad position. So I could have somebody mounted on me and they don't even feel me accessing a blade, and then I could just start shanking them while I'm on the bottom getting dominated in the position. So that's kind of, I'm sure there's other guys that probably explain it better, but I'm talk like a caveman. So that's how jiu-jitsu is, and that's how weapon-based entanglements are.
All right, so you know how, especially we see it in gun culture a little bit, but you can find it other places as well. But specifically in the use of force arena, military, law enforcement, and so forth. Sometimes, let me know if this makes any sense to you. And I've encountered, or it is sometimes you have, or we all have problems. We all have problems that we have to deal with, especially in the use of force case. And then every once in a while, something that is a solution over here is forced into the arena over there. And I'm thinking about this in the sense of Jiu Jitsu, where you were talking about how in Jiu Jitsu, your win factor is submission. You're trying to, you can do a lot of harm to a person, whether it's just submission through unconsciousness or arm bars and breaking bones and stuff. However, a win on the mat, even if it were to be carried to fruition with the broken joints and unconsciousness, is not the same as a win in the real world. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I completely understand where you're going with this, and what I like to tell, like, the students or patrons is when I'm in a weapon-based entanglement, when I'm training for it, I'm playing for keeps. Like, there's no reset button. This is life. So you could, suffer seriously bodily harm or even death. And when it's jiu-jitsu, you could get your arms broken. You could possibly die in jiu-jitsu, but the percentage is very low, right? But when I'm fighting,
yeah. Well, I mean, you like let's just think of like a choke, right? If you continued the action of the choke, eventually the body would expire, right?
Exactly.
But it's not the same. What I'm thinking of is like we're kind of losing sight of the forest by staring at a tree. It's kind of the inversion of that metaphor where I know that I can win a fight by submitting somebody, but sometimes that's not the best way to win the fight. And
1,000%.
Okay. Yeah.
1,000%. And me being a third degree black belt in jiu-jitsu and doing jiu-jitsu my whole life, when I'm entangled with somebody, I don't want to go to the ground.
Okay.
And the reason is like I explained earlier, is like kit, this and that, plus one factor. So if I'm on the ground and I'm fighting this one dude, what if he has a friend that decides to, hop in, which has happened to me because I was able to test my jiu-jitsu at a young age because, like, starting jiu-jitsu pro athletes, what we used to do was bounce at night at nightclubs.
Okay.
So it fit towards our schedule. So I learned the hard way one time. That's why my nose is so huge, is because one time I was mounted on a dude. The dude was drunk and wanted to fight. I mounted him, started holding him, and his friend comes out of nowhere and just soccer kicks me right in the face.
Ow.
So
Ooh.
So thank God all the other bouncers show up and get him. But imagine if it was just a 1-versus-1, I get rocked back. Or let's say now, not in a bouncer capacity, but in a law enforcement capacity, I take that kick to the face, I fall back, I'm unconscious. What tools can the adversary or the bad person render from me? They could grab my own gun, they could grab my taser, they could grab whatever is on me, right? And start using it. So that's why I go over the whole task versus priority concept.
Okay. Could you explain that? I have a question for you that I want to see, and that is, do you think that you're familiar with the concept of a training scar, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen in your experience there being a training scar, quite simply in the form that when you train in jiu-jitsu, you typically train symmetrically, not saying every person's the same skill level. You might train against someone with higher or lower skill level. But I mean, like, there's a start point where you start and then you fight. And then unless it's a training scenario where you begin in a position, there's this kind of symmetrical starting. Whereas in the real world that we play on, it is never symmetrical. No. Or it's very rarely symmetrical. It's not like, it's not like a video game concept where like it scales to your difficulty. Have you seen that in the form of a training scar before?
So there's training scars, of course. There's always going to be training scars, especially what's the end goal? Are you training jiu-jitsu to be the best jiu-jitsu fighter? Or are you training jiu-jitsu for self-defense? Like, it has to be what you're doing. And when it comes to reality-based or, doing the combatives portion, it's a lot more primitive. Rather than in jiu-jitsu, it's a lot more technical. So Craig Douglas, the inventor of, ECQC, he told me this when I first started learning combatives, because all this has come from experience for me. So Craig told me that, hey, get 2 technical blue belts in your gym, have them start rolling or sparring, and then throw a fake blue gun in the mix, right, while they're being technical. So you see these guys doing these beautiful sweeps, beautiful submissions, and then I throw a blue gun in the middle. And all of a sudden you see these sweeps and these techniques go from being awesome to now these dudes are like literally grabbing each other and yanking each other down and going to like a primitive instinct that you don't usually see much because they're so used to the technical aspect of sparring in jiu-jitsu that now when you put a weapon in there that you're like, hey, the end goal is to get to this, they just end up becoming primitive. So it's crazy to see. And for me, what the reason I started weapon-based entanglements and I started training with Craig and stuff like that is because my own experience on the road is I was fighting with a subject and then his gun falls out on the ground. And I'll remember like we were looking straight at each other and then we see the gun fall and we look back at each other. And I'm like, holy crap. Like I got to really not let him get to that and start
the game has changed.
Using everything. And I was in like, I just came from being a professional grappler to being a cop. So I was in good shape. And, after that, after my backup shows up and we handcuff him, I'm there sitting there with my kid on and I'm like, man, this is a lot harder than fighting in jiu-jitsu or MMA or anything like that because I never took for an account, hey, I got a plate carrier, I got a Batman belt on, lack of sleep, constant caffeine, things like that. And, you're sitting there and you're thinking like, man, what could I have done better? And thank God I had the composure to still push him back and notice that the gun was there. But sometimes you'll see guys, they'll get just locked into it and they don't even see the guns flying out or anything like that. So for me, that's why I started training for it.
So if you were to encounter somebody, and let's call him the perfect student, who has spent a couple of years training in jiu-jitsu, right? But he does not have an accurate sense. Well, the perfect student, the perfect private, the perfect, not acolyte, but for you, how would you try to communicate the difference between the training world and the real world in that arena? If we removed all ego and it was just perfect communication.
So removing all ego and perfect communication and explain like what the real world is compared to like jiu-jitsu, you're saying like the training environment there?
Yeah, but how would you, if you had again, we're going back to this idea of the student that you wanted to mentally prepare them for use of force, how would you start that conversation?
That's a tough one to think about because usually when I talk to people, it's just like, hey, do you feel that you're adequate enough to walk around with that gun in your waistband or a knife on you, in the streets or anything like that? Like, are you willing to, fight over it?
Okay.
And things like that, like primitive, like it's kind of weird. It's like, you got to get primitive. Like, are you willing to like, it's going to be like short in intensity, violent in nature, and you're going to be very intimate with that person. Like you're going to be up close.
This is coming from I once heard a thing by Christian Craighead, who very simply described it. If you're going to carry a gun, you better be willing to use it.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that it, like, there's a certain profundity to it. It's very simple, but very direct. Like if you're going to carry a firearm around, and he was talking a little bit from a skills and professions based, but also from like a morals based of like, if you're going to carry that tool, you must be willing to use it. You have to rise up to the level of responsibility required, not only because you need to be responsible for the firearm and what you do with it, but also you're choosing to present you're choosing to carry yourself as someone in a role. And if you do not fulfill that role, then you have betrayed your community, your environment. And I think that metaphor applies very simply to something like a father or a husband. Like if you're going to carry a firearm and you're going out in the world with your wife or your girlfriend or whatever you're doing, your family, and then there's an event that happens and you have a gun but you're not willing to use it because you're a coward, then there's something wrong with you. You should not be carrying it to begin with. Now he was, but that mentality stuck. Now, is there a direct parallel to this environment that you're talking about with ECQC? Because so oftentimes I see it starting, and I want to kind of remain in the metaphor of the perfect student. So
Mhm.
oftentimes I see it kind of framed in this arena of like who's better at fighting or kind of the ego-ish stuff, and I really want to move away from that and move into being better at what we do, and like and like how do I communicate to somebody who's as a student or is learning to consider use of force? How what is if we could erase the part that gets in the way, which is just who's cooler at being cool or whatever, and go straight to like, this is a lesson I wish I knew when I was your age, or this is something that I want you to know. Like, I have a son, I don't, but if I had a son, it's like I would want him to know that if he's going to carry a gun, he better be willing to use it, not and that first, and so that he can dig down and find the confidence to do what is right. And so, how does this apply in your arena?
So, like you were talking about tools, I think there's two things. You need to be proficient with that tool,
Mm-hmm.
and you also need to be able to retain that tool
Okay.
because, you have these guys that carry, guns that are untrained or maybe just shoot, but then they're like, oh, I'll just shoot you. Like, I've had a lot of people tell me they'll just shoot me because they see my ears and they're already intimidated.
Mm-hmm.
So, especially like I've had cops tell me that. They're like, hey, you're not going to be trouble because I'll just shoot you. And I'm like, well, how proficient is your draw and, proximity to me? Are you going to be able to get to that gun?
Sure. Sure.
And when I
Well,
tell them that, they're like, oh shit,
yeah.
and it lets people know that they're so naive on just because they have that tool, they think they're good at that tool. Like, there's no stress inoculation behind it. That's what I like about our system is that we produce a lot of stress with,
Okay.
a lot of simunition. We use the force on force helmets. So you're testing this method out right then and there. And you're seeing where your deficiencies are and what you need to work on. Just like in jiu-jitsu, I watch tape of my old matches and I'm like, all right, I need to do this and this and this. Or I take my training. Hey, I did this, this, this. This is how we work on it. We apply it the same way in combatives. So for the ideal student, I would tell them, be proficient at the tools that you carry, whether it's a knife, gun, handkerchief, whatever it is, just be proficient on how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And then also know how to retain those weapons if you have weapons on you, right?
Yeah.
So know how to retain that gun. God forbid you do have to use deadly force or whatever, but it's in a confined space. Are you prepared for that? Because if you're prepared for the 7 yards and beyond, that's cool. But when it starts encroaching on you, how are
Yes.
you going to prepare for that?
Oh no. I that is a dangerous place to begin. I personally have an ego cut off, and that is, and I'm fortunate, maybe even privileged enough to be able to do this. But it works something like, if I'm in a semi-professional relationship with somebody, and they hold the mentality of, oh well, I mean, I'll just shoot you, and they have no intention of bettering themselves. Yeah, then I will immediate disassociation, isolation, like because you're not smart enough or good enough to be in this environment on the level. And thankfully, I'm in a position where I don't have to. I'm not like forced to work in that capacity, but it's been the case before. Where it's like, oh, your mentality is not. It's not like a simplified answer, but that's kind of, it's the ego cut off. It's like, oh well, okay. Oh, well, I'll just yada yada. Like, okay, that's great, because I mean, we know, like, you've seen force, that it's not the movies. There are no, my favorite metaphor, or not favorite, one of my favorite things lately is I've started seeing in film where there's no longer like negotiations. There isn't this long monologue by the bad guy. It's just like, bam, done. Like, I'm not here to fight you. You're done. And so there's a scene from a book in one of Jack Carr's books where they use an EFP to destroy a target. There was no negotiation, no conversation, no ice, no just. And so that is that's that line where you cut off between, you're not mature enough yet to be playing in this pool, or what can I learn from you? And I wonder, what are the lines that you hear from people that do you have a similar strategy for approaching colleagues? And two, if so, what lines do you hear from people that immediately put them in the kind of the other category versus the category you want to associate with?
So for me, it's like, there's people there's the trained and then there's the untrained, right? Or the worthy
Okay.
people and then the not so worthy people when it comes to, these type of, you know, things, especially in law enforcement, right? There's all sorts of walks of life. But the thing for me is I'm trying to help all of them attain a goal where at least they don't end up on the news or dead,
Sure.
because as my job as a human and as a Christian is to help people that need to be helped. And when I start seeing people like that are very ignorant to this type of like training, or
Mm-hmm.
their ego is inflated because they don't want to look bad because they're so used to being the dominant one that they can't get dominated. Like,
Sure.
for instance, for example, today I had a brown belt chick in Jiu Jitsu. She was beating the crap out of me today.
Mm.
Like my ego wasn't there. Like, I'm a man, I gotta do this. Like, I'm letting her beat me up for a little bit so I could see like, hey, how can I get out of these moves that she's putting me in?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I could just beat the crap out of her the whole roll, but what am I going to learn?
Sure.
Especially from a technical standpoint. Like, she's a lot more technical than I am because she's a female in a sport where dudes are bigger, faster, stronger.
Yeah.
So I'm trading technique for technique with her rather than using strength. It's you have to learn how to shut off the ego. And in law enforcement and in the military, you see a lot of dudes with these inflated egos, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Um, so when it comes to stuff like that, when I approach people about this, when I know they have that inflated ego, or like they're just standoffish, the first thing I do is I give them something positive
Okay.
before because if I just attack you right now with criticism, you're going to just shut me off, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, but if I say something cool to you and I say something positive that I know and it's the truth, I'm not going to lie to you. That's one thing, is I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to tell you the truth about something, but it's going to be a positive truth. And then now that I have that, on you, I'm going to give you a little bit of criticism on why I think you need this. And then I'm going to end it again with a positive thing, because I don't want the last thing on your mind being that criticism that I just harped on. So I'm going to
Gotcha.
give you another positive. Like if a guy's not understanding a move, I get it. We're human. Like, we often forget what it's like to be a beginner. So I'll be like, hey, you're doing a great job at this. We need to tweak this up because it's not looking so good at this. But man, I'm really glad you're really attempting this move, because once you get it, you're going to do great with it.
Gotcha.
That, like, how can you shut me down with your ego after I tell you that? But if I go old school train of thought and I go, hey, you suck, do it like this, stop sucking, and walk away, you're going to be like, screw
Yeah,
you, bud.
it's not productive. I can see it. Like in some environments, you have to have a certain amount of respect for people to even accept that kind of language, but we can kind of roll into it. So as far as ECQC, how do you see it applying? How does it change your mentality when it comes to use of force? As you've learned it more, especially moving from jiu-jitsu into this.
So as a jiu-jitsu guy, my number one goal is to take you down to the ground and, get to a dominant position and then start wrapping you up and doing whatever I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Now with, ECQC and things, there's a lot of principles and operating system checklists that we have to go through in order for the system to work. But the rules is to stay upright and to stay conscious. So
Okay.
I want to stay upright. I don't want to go to the ground, and I want to stay conscious, because if I get knocked out, now you have access to all my tools.
Yep. Now,
So,
how has it changed the way that you approach the morality of use of force?
so the morality of use of force is, it might be that 2 to 3 meter gap or even closer where we're just like on top of each other, and I might have to, deploy a weapon right then and there. Do I have that mindset to pull out a knife and start, going to town, or, pulling out a firearm and then using deadly force within that confined space and being that close and intimate with someone? It's not like we're, hey, he's 20 yards that way. Okay, safety's off. Boom. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be far more in depth. I might have blood all over me. It's going to be nasty. Right.
Yeah, because
So we
it's
have
one thing. It's one thing to consider how to do it, how to like win a fight, but it's another to consider what moral constraints do I have? Not legal, not professional, but literally moral ones, where it's like, it's like if you're fighting a kid, like say a kid, you're in the streets, generic bad guy position, and a 14-year-old kid with a shiv, a little stick knife, comes out and he's 80 pounds or 100 pounds and he's got a 4-inch blade, like how would you morally approach that if you have, and he's 21 yards away, whatever, we'll do 21 feet away, not yards, feet. It's like, well, I'm not just going to shoot you because it's different. I have a moral constraint. I have a moral consideration, but I might be able to escalate. I might have to escalate to that level if necessary, right? How does, as you've trained in this, how has it changed the way that you look at the morality in certain kinds of situations, especially like that pre-fight tension area?
So just like anything else, it's like even doing tactics, right? So on the SWAT team, they harp a lot on your tactics are dictated by your environment.
Sure.
So my combatives are dictated by the environment that's given to me. So is there things that I could use, or, like if it comes down to that I need to handle business, I know the fact I can handle business because I've done it so many times through stress inoculation, on running scenarios through force on force and sim, and seeing what works and what doesn't work. Now, mind you, it's not the end all be all, because you could do everything right and that day you're just going to eat it.
Sure.
We've seen guys that are awesome. I've seen dudes in the military that are awesome, like moving through structures, and they just have one day where, they're still doing everything according to plan. And, God bless them, it's their time of day. I feel bad for them, and they're doing everything right. But I want to help mitigate that, right? Because if I'm going to die, I'm going to die gloriously. I'm not going to die just, hey, all right, here I am. All right, now I'm dead, right? I'm going to fight for every inch or last breath that I have, while if I'm entangled with that. And a lot of guys don't think like that. And it's not like one of those like train how you fight things. It's just like, hey, you have to know that this is going to get ugly. Are you good with getting ugly?
Yeah, I've definitely woken up and had days where I knew that I didn't have it in me that day.
You're human.
Yeah, but I've like, it's an odd thing to kind of admit to, but I've definitely had days where it's like, you know what, if I got into a fight today, I'd probably lose. And maybe I'm wrong, but.
So I think your body kicks into that autopilot, right? Because I've had days like that, and then I've gotten tested and I succeeded when I got tested.
Mm-hmm.
And that day I woke up not feeling it, tired, lack of caffeine or whatever, sleep deprived, all this stuff, right? And I got tested that day, and all of a sudden, like, a switch just comes out and you just go right into autopilot, and all the training kicks in.
Good.
And you're not thinking, you're just responding, and you're responding to all the training that you did. So that's why I'm a big component on the force on force, not really force on paper, or, this whole Tai Chi stuff, like you need to get a lot of stress put on you to see how you're going to respond, and that's what helped me out a lot. Like if there's this guy named Chris LeBlanc, and he was at the Combative Summit, and he was talking about how martial arts, but also force on force training helped him survive a hostage rescue when he got shot in the face making entry.
Oh.
And he said that what happens is like, if I shoot you right now with a sim round, right? And you just go, all right, you got me, I'm done. What does that start training my mind to start doing? Give up.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But
it's
if
like
I hit,
it's like the paintball response. Oh, I hit, I'm done.
Yeah, I'm out. I'm out of the game.
If I raise my hand and say I'm hit, I don't have to get shot anymore, and that's just not how it works.
And what he said is that when he was doing his CQB stuff, when he would get tagged, he would still keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And that's what happened in the HR. He breaches the door. I guess the guy was waiting in like the corner down like this, and then popped one, hit him in the face, and he still makes entry and does what he needs to do. And then after everything settles, he's like, holy crap, I got shot in the face. And then they rush him to the hospital. But he goes, just that constant training and building that repetition or that myelination in my brain, hey, now I'm able to, if I'm doing this in the training environment, your mind's just going to switch to that, hey, it's game time, and you're just doing it.
Yeah, I had a
And
team leader who got shot in the arm by an with AK round, and it went through and through, and it took him, I think, about an hour to recognize that he'd been shot.
and why? Because you guys are just training for that. You're training for
Mm-hmm.
that fight. You're training for that, worthy adversary,
Mm-hmm.
and that you're not gonna just go out like, hey, I'm gonna go out like this. Even if you're tired and stuff, you're just like, nah, bro,
Yeah.
I still got some left in me. I'm gonna go and handle my business.
Yeah. How do you train out that scar? Okay, and that I'm going to use that as an example. But I unfortunately, even though we talked a little bit about this before, and I have to tell it a little bit in story form. We were doing a training event with. I was in. This was in Ranger Battalion, and we're doing a training thing, kind of like a team live fire. And at some point in time, um, it was an extremely hot day, so we were worried about heat cats and stuff like that. But I wasn't a team leader at this time, and something kind of like something sort of administratively went wrong. I can't remember what it was, whether it was, but and I was a machine gunner in a squad, and I said something out loud like index, or which is end exercise
Yeah,
kind of thing, right? But I wasn't in charge, but I didn't say it as a command. I said it kind of like to myself
yeah,
because something went wrong. I can't remember whether there was something wrong with the gun. The I can't remember, but my team leader, it was exactly that training scar of like the fight stops when I say end X. And then we were all under an extreme amount of pressure. We were all under pressure because there's a higher pressure training experience, and it was like 102. It was super hot. One of the people were like pissing and puking themselves. It's just tough. But my team leader like heard me say that, and he smoked the dog piss out of me because he picked up on it, and I didn't pick up on it till later. Probably not even as clear until you just said this now. But and that was exactly what happened. Is I had I had a training scar in my brain, in my mind, that once a certain series of conditions are met, it's over. But it wasn't over. And so my posture changed and I kind of stopped, whatever. And I had to get that trained out of me through pain. But how would you do it? Let's go back to the perfect student. You've got a guy who's got the skills, but he has this mentality. Let's say, again, a colleague that you're working with who's a little bit younger than you, that has the hard skills of being able to do the maneuvers well, but he still has this mentality of on switch, off switch. How would you try to get him to identify that and change it? Or would you?
so it must be like a Ranger thing because Craig Douglas was a Ranger as well. So
Yeah.
I remember Craig when I was learning under him. I still learn under him. Dudes would get shot in the trainings and they would stop immediately. And Craig goes, "Keep going." I didn't say stop,
Mm-hmm.
and they would go, but they would be shocked like that, and they kept going until Craig said break. And I think it's just a thing that we're just so accustomed to, especially with like playing video games or
Sure.
paintball or things like that. Or when things just start getting rough for us, we're just like, it's our natural instinct to be like, all right, good. I think that's why they smoke you, because like when you're smoking, you're past that thing where you're like, I'm done, but I got to keep going because if not, the team
Mm-hmm.
leader is going to be mad at me. And things like that. So it's the same principle as like when you're working out, that you just don't stop when it starts getting hard. It's the same thing when we do these stress inoculation drills. So I tell guys, it's like, hey, you get clipped once. Until I say stop, you don't stop. You keep going and you keep building that out of your head. Another thing too is like in jiu-jitsu is like when I see dudes laying down after a hard roll on the mat, like they just like lay down like starfish. I see that as a form of weakness. I tell them, hey, stand up, walk around, get your posture up, don't just lay there and die. It kind of like, I don't like using the word mindset, but it's like a modality thing, like within your head. Like you need to just like, hey, don't be weak when it's training time.
Sure.
So You see other guys do this, and like I had a mental coach, Eric Parker, great dude. He owns this company called Wintensi, which goes over like the fighter's mind. But there's an article on Eric Parker and on combat, and they talk about him. He was a SWAT guy that got his arm blew off, and still was able to handle his business and do his job. And he started looking at how the brain works, and you have this thing called the cortex and the limbic system. And the limbic system is just like, hey, you're fight or flight, right? And then the cortex is like, how do I think under all this stress? And that's what we want to start doing, is bringing dudes to start thinking with that cortex. Just even when things aren't going right, you're still in that cortex, finding how to solve those problems. And we don't see that enough. Like as soon as people get met with some opposition, they fold. And they're like, all right, cool, whatever. But then when you start getting like dudes that are just like, nah, I got to keep going until I figure this out and until I get it right, or at least, I'm successful. That's when you start building those like training reps and you start taking away those scars.
Okay. It's a troubling. I understand the difficulty with the word mindset, because unfortunately mindfulness is just a new age version of trying to do philosophy for some people. It's just a waste of time. But mindset, okay. I think I'm picking up quite a bit better now, but so when it comes then to the skill of like developing skill, what does right look like? We've talked about staying upright and not going unconscious, but how do you see that? Is it broken up into various skill categories, or how does somebody approach something like ECQC?
So ECQC is what I love about it is that you could just be a beginner. Like I could take you that has no combative experience. Maybe you know how to shoot a gun, but you have no jiu-jitsu or no wrestling, and you know what? Like you could beat up a black belt in jiu-jitsu. I've seen it where we've had guys that have no grappling experience, and we have world champion black belts show up to these classes, and just because of here I go saying it again, the mindset or the primitive instinct to know when to use those tools at the right moments, they become successful. For instance, I had a world champion black belt guy come to one of my courses, and I had a guy who was a cop that didn't really train much jiu-jitsu. He was probably like a white belt. He just got into it. And he goes against this black belt guy, and this black belt guy takes him down, gets to his back, and this guy's freaking out a little bit, but he remembers he still has his tools. So this guy has a dominant position, has control over, under, on the back. And this dude beautifully just takes out his pistol and goes boom, boom, and puts 3 in the face shield.
Yep.
So, the black belt guy is winning the fight per se, but then now he's dead. So he lost it completely.
He's winning the match, but he loses the fight.
Yes, and that's why I'm going into this whole, instinct where it's like, hey, he's thinking it's still a jiu-jitsu match because he's going to revert back to what he's always done. We're creatures of habit. We're always going to revert back to what's easiest for us. So he goes into the whole jiu-jitsu thing. This cop goes to the next thing that he thinks is like, okay, I'm getting my butt kicked. I got to start using tools.
Yeah.
When the black belt has never had to use any of his tools before because he's always been the black belt.
Yeah.
So that's what I say about things like that is that you don't need experience. We do a lot of isolation drills that build that fine skill set for you to be good. We're not going to say that you're going to go out there and win a fight now, but we're giving you principles and concepts that you're going to know, like, hey, I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't do that. Especially like when it comes to, deciding that deadly force, is authorized now, that you're good to do it within the boundaries of the law. And now you have to employ those tools. Well, I'm just not going to employ the tools while we're both like loose, and things like that. I'm going to make sure that I have all your upper extremities isolated before I deploy that tool. And that tool is not going to be floating around. It's going to be tight and, compact with me and connected with me. So that way it avoids any mitigation of him trying to grab my tool and take it away from me. So that's that retaining the tool aspect that I talk about. So it's knowing these principles. Yeah.
As you're referring to tool, I assume that you're talking mostly about a knife, but sometimes about a firearm, right?
Firearm or knife, I carry both on me, so it's really up on
Okay.
the end user on what you're using. Because some guys don't carry guns, some of them just carry knives. Some
Mm-hmm.
guys carry both. I'm an advocate for carrying both.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, know the tools that you have and know how to use them.
What
And
knife
know
do you
when.
carry? What's your normal knife?
So there's two knives that I carry. I either carry a Shivworks clinch pick,
Okay.
which is it's a fixed blade, double edge. Has a reverse in front. It's small, like it's like that. Like in my hands, it looks like that, bro. You wouldn't even know I have a knife in my hand until you see it up close.
Mm-hmm.
And then the SOC P dagger, the Special Operation Combatants dagger, and I like that one because it has the index finger for the retention, so I can hold if I have to grab my gun and start, using that.
Okay. So the sock P and the clinch pick. I'm
Uh-huh.
assuming the sock P is something. Do you carry the sock P every day, or is that just when you're in kit?
No, I carry it every day. It really depends on what I'm wearing and things I'm doing. Some days I'll carry the clinch pick, if I have a belt on me or anything like that, or if have my new Kydex holster that has the little clip so I could put it on my shorts, then I'll carry
Gotcha.
the clinch pick. But I have the SOC P dagger because I have the rescue tool and the regular one on my kit, and I also carry one in my waistband.
Okay. So, that's it's a useful small piece of information just to kind of pass it in. So then, professionally, what you've worked in law enforcement, professional, and then as well as training. Do you see more students coming from the Jiu Jitsu world or more from the gun world?
So I get probably around equal. We'll see
Okay.
more from the gun world, but we're getting a lot of influx of jiu-jitsu black belts and stuff and hybrids coming in that are starting to do the weapon-based entanglements because they're seeing that jiu-jitsu is not the end-all be-all. It's just the start.
Okay. And
And
this is especially in law enforcement.
law enforcement, it's slowly getting there. It's just you have to build it up. Law enforcement is looking for that progressiveness that they need. It's just it takes time, just like anything else. They're trying to get out of that, how you talked about, like that old mindset of training or the old modalities of like, we've always done it this way instead
Sure.
of just like, what is the why and, how can we make our guys better and how is it affecting us?
Yeah.
So you don't see that often. You're seeing that more now than the whole old school of like, no, we always done it this way. We're going to keep doing it this way.
Sure. We've all experienced people who work within law enforcement who are functionally incompetent at the use of force.
Yes.
They're just not. They don't know how to shoot their gun. They don't know. They can't hit their target. Whatever. We've all met, but we've also met people in multiple different environments, professions, and so on, that fit that definition. We've also most likely both met law enforcement who are like razor sharp, solid dudes, and so I don't I don't see any value in generalizing police in sort of a skill based matchmaking kind of way. What's more important in this case is if you've got a guy who's coming from the gun world, maybe he's prior military or whatever, but has no real jujitsu experience. How do you what do you but he knows he needs to get training in this environment. How do you introduce them into ECQC? How do you do? What's the introduction? What's the onboarding ramp? What's
So
the hit drug?
so like Craig has a 3-day course. Mine are skill builders. So I run
Okay.
skill builders, which are 8-hour classes to build you up for the 3 days that Craig does. Because Craig goes over a lot of things. Like he goes over managing unknown contacts, which is how to talk, how to see, how to recognize if you're going to get attacked, like pre-attack indicators and things like that. He's phenomenal at that. And then you have the weapon-based entanglement portion where he goes over all the grappling techniques and things like that. When I tell guys when they first take the classes, hey, you're not going to become John Wick. You're not going to become this fictitious character that's dog died. And then now you're going to do some like crazy jiu-jitsu stuff with suits and then shoot everybody and kill like 6 attackers at once, right? What you will become is you're going to see a lot of deficiencies when you take this class. And it's like what they say, you don't know what you don't know.
Yes.
And you're going to see that you do have a lot of deficiencies that you need to work on. And it's a good eye opener that you're getting it now in a training environment where I know you're going to go home safe than in a real life situation where you don't know what the odds are.
Yeah.
So like I like having beginners come in because they don't have that whole, hey, I was this, I was that. You know, like you'll have some military guys that come in, well, I was in the combatives program, so I'm practically ready for this. All right, cool. Or you have jiu-jitsu black belts. Oh, I'm a champion at jiu-jitsu. I fought MMA. I'm ready for this. And you're like, you sure about that?
Once again, that's the ego problem, though. Like,
Mhm.
I want to make sure. I really want to keep trying to move beyond that. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not. There are certain things. There's certain things that I'm no longer interested in trying to convince somebody about, right? And so one of them might be like, you should learn how to draw a holster from a holster, right? Like, I don't. We don't surround ourselves. I mean, we do not want to be surrounded by people who may or may not want to learn how to draw a pistol from a holster. That's a kind of a given, right? We'd assume. Yeah, we want to surround ourselves with people who are like who have their own motivation. I don't need to. If I'm I'm not dragging you up the mountain, kind of thing, right? We're not dragging each other around like, hey man, you got to learn how to draw a holster. Like, okay. That's it's just that's not what I'm looking for. The ego thing. Oh, I did a combatives class. I don't need to learn anything like that. You're retired. Okay, that's what you are. You're retired. I'm not here to make a judgment of you in the sense of, oh, that means you're a dumb person. It's just you're irrelevant to skill development at this time. That's fine.
Absolutely.
Go retire. Go enjoy your life. But it's that can come across a bit as an ego thing, and I get it. So then I want to go back to the skill thing. What are do you remember in 2000, I want to say 13, 14, maybe 15 time frame, the kind of Kali knife fighting style was super trendy?
Yeah.
Okay. I have personally struggled with the idea of knife fighting because it seems more of what I encounter is charlatanism and mythology than real life. If you've been around the gun world for a long enough time, you know that John Wick is entirely fictional. That's not how people fight. That's not how people move. That's not how actions work. It's fine. It's a movie. But the knife fighting world, or the idea of getting in a fight with a knife, is also struggles from that. But I don't have the experience to completely define it. And I'm wondering if you can help me fill that gap.
So one of the reasons why ShivWorks got his name is because what do prisoners use? Shiv,
Shivs.
right?
Yep.
Shivs. Who's the best knife fighters in the world? Prisoners. They're just shanking everybody left and right, and they're practicing it. Like Craig did a lot of studying on, prisoners and like with knife fighting and things like that. Like you see them, they'll watch like the guard and see how their armor is tailored, and you'll see them do like, it's kind of like katas in their cell. They're like, all right, I'm going to go this way and then hit them like that. Go this way and hit them like this. And they become the sum of their exposure because they're in an environment where they're just using shivs. So they're like the best knife fighters. Now, there is Kali guys that are legit. Like the Atienza guys, I've met them. I wouldn't want to mess with them with a knife. But that's years and years of practice of them, getting all the cuts and, learning how to use their blades and things like that. I don't have that time to do that. For us, our edge weapon system, like my blade is a support tool.
Mm-hmm.
My primary is the firearm, but my blade is a support tool. Because if I can't get to my firearm, I can get to my blade. If I can't get to my blade, I get to my firearm. And for us, it's like we give you basic principles and skill sets to, at least hold your own to get that survivability that you need. Mm-hmm. God forbid if it's for law enforcement, for backup to come, or military capacity to get that support in, where you get another buddy to come help you out and things like that. Or at least give you that survivability for the cops to show up, hopefully somebody calls for that. But the difference is Kali is a system that takes years and years to master. Okay. With us, we're showing you basic, upright grappling to at least just provide survivability and let you know when you're in deep trouble and when you're safe. and also to let you know how to react to that. Does that kind of make sense?
It does. Is the way that you're describing it, is ECQC to Jiu Jitsu in this sense kind of like, or is ECQC to Kali like Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do was to karate, where his, from what I understand about his, let's call it fighting style, before or after outside of film, was small destructive movements opposed to like lifetime skill development kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Basically, Jeet Kune Do, the principle was is take whatever's useful from anything and then apply it to yourself on what you will use. There's no set curriculum in Jeet Kune Do.
Okay.
If you read the book of Bruce Lee, I'm sure you have.
I haven't.
Just Jeet Kune Do is just all like he took everything from each martial art that he found was useful and applied it in there.
Okay.
It's the same. It's kind of like the same principles with us. Like we have, we use upright grappling because that's if you look back, like in ancient history, the Greek days and stuff like that, they were doing what was called pancration, and wrestling, Greco-Roman wrestling. Wrestling has always been around since basically the start of man, and it's the same thing till this day. If you look at the samurai times, they were wrestling and using the blades with the katanas and the tantos and things like that. And then you also got the Vikings and things like that. They were always using edge weapons, but they were also using some form of wrestling in there. And that's what we apply in ours is the upright grappling, which is based off of, Greco-Roman wrestling, folk style wrestling, and a little bit of freestyle wrestling. And then we'll add a little bit of jiu-jitsu in there, but it's for us to know basic holds and how to, contain that person, isolate them so that they can't get access to their weapon system, but we could get full access to ours.
What is the skill development of ECQC like? What is the it's not training, that's not the right word. I'm saying like when you see, what is the amount of time that a person needs to be spent in training to go from ignorant to practical? Not expert, not genius, not that category, not instructor level, but because with shooting a handgun, the introductory window is actually can be pretty short. It's the achievement to mastery that's really hard. And in a couple of hours, you can take somebody who's never shot a gun and make them at least somewhat comfortable around using a firearm. It doesn't mean they're going to be the most accurate. It doesn't mean they might not be very accurate at all, but at least they're going to be comfortable. They know what each of the buttons do. They know what the controls do. And then from there, they can learn how to be accurate. But that's a couple of hours. Now, if you want to be skilled and have that training to fall back on, then you got to start doing dry fire, and you got to start doing, reps and practice and whatever. You've got the 10,000 hours to mastery concept from the talent code. But what is the introductory period? How long do you think the introductory period, or how long do you want to spend with a student where you go from complete naivety or introduction? This is, again, perfect student mentality. You've got the no ego, great guy, wants to learn, doesn't have any skill. How long do you think it takes for you as an instructor to take him from no skill to you can stand on your own now?
We've had guys with no experience that just go through one class and, they can stand on their own. They've used it the next day at work. It's really based on the individual. From my experience, there's guys that learn at a certain rate, and then there's guys that it takes a lot more time for them to pick up the curriculum. But we show you just like basic necessities of what an underhook, an overhook is. We teach you pressure, posture, and position, which are three things that we need in the operating system. And we do those isolation drills that build that fine skill set. And I'll walk over and explain like little tidbits that I see of like, hey, do this to, get this better posture, do this to get this, pressure, and then improving the position on, giving them set techniques that we do, or letting them figure out how to get to that position, because if I constantly just tell you how to get there after I show it, I need you to also figure it out too, because in real life, I'm not going to be there. So you're going to have to figure it out on your own. So that being said, is like I've had guys that, everybody leaves with the understanding of, hey, either I got to do a lot more of this and I got to drill, or do that what's called, like, the dry fire and things like that. Maybe sign up for a jiu-jitsu gym, go to wrestling practices, to understand more of how my body needs to move. And then also dudes figuring out like, hey, maybe I'm not adequate enough yet to carry a gun. Until I'm ready, I'll start carrying a gun. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really on the end user. So for me, it's the student. How quick do they learn? How are they processing this? You know, but most of the guys that have come through, guys and girls that have come through, is they already have like a newfound confidence, because they're like, I didn't know I was capable of doing this till you put me in the evolution
Mm-hmm.
where I'm wearing this face mask and I got a sim gun and a training blade. I
Okay.
didn't know I had that in me.
Do you think people who work in law enforcement have a moral imperative that they ought learn ECQC? It's a moral imperative, not just a advantage.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
You don't get that type of training in the academy or anything like that. Like you don't. We've seen a exponential growth in where we've put guys in these situations and they've had to do it in real life, and they're like, man, the evolution was harder than in real life.
Okay.
Just for that one incident that they had. I'm not saying that it's going to be easy for every incident that you have,
No.
but for that one sustained one that they had, especially after a training class with me, they're like, I'm looking at things I never
Hmm.
looked at before because of that one evolution.
If you were to take the training pipeline for your profession, how would you change it?
Everything would be force on force.
Everything would be force on force. Well, you can't. Well, you can't do everything for. Sorry, let me rephrase this. You can't do everything force on force because they have to shoot a real gun at some point in time. But
Yeah,
all of the use of force training would be force on
force on
force.
force. I wouldn't do anything with like I like the simulators and stuff. If you want to get some extra training in, but you need to have that stress of, hey, there's going to be a certain pain compliance if you don't do it correctly. It's like building tactics. If I don't pan that threshold, properly, and I'm just half-assing it, there's got to be some form of payment for that.
Yeah,
And you
you're gonna
don't,
get smoked, dude.
yeah, and you
You're
don't
it's
get
gonna
that with
hurt.
force on paper. Like you do
Mm,
force on paper, it's just a paper target like this,
sure.
and you're like, all right, cool. But then when you have somebody slinging something back at you, you're like, oh crap, I gotta start moving.
Yes.
That sympathetic nerve response kicks in. You don't get sympathetic nerve response from a piece of paper. It's the same thing with DT. Like if I just keep doing like these techniques and then we do that and we're like, all right, guys, great job. Boom. We're ready to go hit the streets.
What's
Like
DT?
defensive tactics. Sorry. Um,
You're not. I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. What's defensive tactics? Is this like
uh,
a training module required for law enforcement?
yeah, it's basically your combatives for law enforcement. They call it defensive tactics instead of combatives.
Is it? It's not force on force.
No,
It's what are you doing? Are you just swinging? Is it just a kata? Are you just swinging your hands at the air? This sounds absurd to me. I'm sorry, not to
there's
be crazy, but like a punching bag is so that you learn the form of a good punch. It doesn't teach you how to be a boxer, right? So what are you doing your technique against? The metaphorical air? I don't know.
you're doing it with a partner at a consensual pace.
Oh,
You're not really fighting them. There's no opposition or no stress inoculation. There is definitely no pain compliance,
okay.
because in the law enforcement capacity right now, it's like they're worried about injuries and things like that.
Yeah,
So
I can understand John Rambo ripping off little Susie's arm because he's strong, big man. But like you're making everybody weak, and you're destroying your ability. You're destroying your people's ability to do anything meaningful because of a fear that one guy be too biggish.
so that's something that you and I, as trained human beings, we're like, this is absurd. But if you look at it from a standpoint, it's like they're just training for the masses. They're not training for, like
Sure.
how you were talking about, like individuals or like teams and things like that. You're talking about for like the general public, and you
Okay.
have guys that are switched on, and then you have people that are just like, hey, just happy to be here and for the check.
Sure.
So the thing is that also too is there's no set way on how to. They don't have a set way on how to train people, right?
Okay.
Or tell people like, hey, we want you to drill this technique at a consensual and non-competitive pace. What does that mean? It's going to just be like, hey, I'm letting you do whatever you want, and I'm not trying to win. Okay,
Sure.
maybe rise the tension a little bit, and we'll go non-consensual and non-competitive, where I'm not trying to win, but I'm going to let you work for it a little bit. And then if we want like a nice little sparring session or to test it under, stress, then we're going to be like, hey, it's non-consensual and competitive. Now you both are trying to win, and the dude's not going to give it to you. You're going to have to take it. So, that's how you have to explain training. And that's how Craig was able to like build up those modalities to start helping people start training smarter, because you'll tell people, hey, go drill this. And then they're like, all right, cool. And then you have like two guys that are Marines in the corner, and they're just like bulldozers going back and forth. And then you got two girls talking about like, whatever. And they're like, oh, I don't get this or whatever. So they don't know how to train or drill properly. You're telling people that have never been like either a wrestling mat or a jiu-jitsu gym how to train. And they're just like, all right, how do we drill this technique?
Okay. So there's a bit of a human issue with just how to train.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to I've seen I don't know if I'd call it necessarily a rise, but I'm going to break firearms training into stereotypes real quick. Not quite archetypes, but stereotypes. One of them is and these are not intended to be like derogatory at all, but one of them would be your classic flat range training class. It's 1 or 2 days long, rifle and pistol. You've got pistol 1, pistol 2, rifle 1, rifle 2, whatever, right? And this is what goes on in the training class? Well, you've got stance, reload, malfunction, awkward shooting positions, accuracy, bill drill, Mozambique, whatever, right? It's very like, this is a shooting focused course. Another one that another example would be kind of like a CQB class, and it's a shoot house, and you got to do all this kind of stuff. A third one is it's the closest. It's always a force on force, or there's a force on force element to it. And I've been to a couple of them, more than one now, where they all seem to come from the same genome, and it's you're using a blue gun, usually a Glock. There's a guy in a mask, and they put you in scenario-based training where it's like you're going to your car and somebody accosts you, and you have to decide whether or not you're going to fight them. And it's sort of this. You have this. You know what I'm talking about? Are you familiar
Monologue.
with this? It's not necessarily a monologue. It's it's the closest thing I can think of to scenario-based training. But the problem that I've run into it a couple times, not every time, but I've definitely seen it where it's like you kind of see the holes in it. Not the fiction of what's going on, but it just turns into you have the stressful moment. So I'll use an example of one that I went through. It's like they had this fake coffee shop set up, and all of the students are the students are mixed with the staff, and they're all in the coffee shop doing normal people coffee shop things. And then one of the role players decides to rob the place, and then another one threatens to commit suicide or something like that, and it turns into a shootout. And then you stop and you review what happened, and then you talk about what you should have done differently. And there's inevitably something like, well, you could have just left the scenario. Like, yeah, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be in a shooting kind of thing. And the problem that I run into with this one is like, I can see where it goes really bad really quickly. It's sort of there to teach, and this is what I'm trying to go with. From the instructor's perspective, or from what I see from the instructors, is it's more often they seem to be trying to create an impact on the student that shakes them out of their comfort zone than it is to really look at the training. And I'm wondering if you have any solutions to this problem. Have I described it very well?
Yeah, you described what you're trying to get your point across to is like, yeah, it's scenario based, but it's not realistic when you're talking about it, because like, yeah, it's weird, like you're sitting there and you're like, yeah, I know something's going to happen in this coffee shop.
Yeah.
Because I'm in this training course.
Yeah.
I know something's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
In real life, it's like, I don't know when this is going to happen. Could be today, tomorrow, could be never. You know, in a coffee shop, I'm not going to be as tense. In a coffee shop, I'm going to be sitting there drinking my coffee, playing on my phone, or talking with a friend.
Yeah.
And then you're like, holy crap, this is happening. You have to stop for a second, realize and process this is happening. And what are my courses of action now? So yeah, it doesn't really bring that realism to it, but at least it's better than, you know, like the sim play or things like that. Yeah, maybe the dialogue is a little like choppy because you're not going to talk to a real person like that, you know, and things like that. But I rather have something like that where, you know, you're going to have opposition and know how you're going to react with a little bit of opposition, even though you know it's coming. Then just be like, hey, you're sitting in a coffee shop. The guy comes out with a gun right now. And then there's a paper target that pops up and you shoot that paper target with a sim gun.
Fair. Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, because it's not shooting back at you.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
You don't get that pain compliance.
Yeah.
You know, so like you can never replicate reality. This is a thing a team leader told me. He goes, you can never replicate reality. Reality is always going to be reality. It's going to be real.
Yeah. Okay. I think I muted myself for a second there.
You there?
Yeah, cool. I'm back.
All right. He goes, you can never replicate reality, but you could work towards trying to have something that's close to it, but it's never going to be it. But I'd rather have something that's close to it, where at least we start building that, you know, and then we start working at it. Because, like, for instance, we had a training. It was probably one of the most fun I've had in a training session with my team. Is we had this thing where it was an officer down, the guy's in an elevated position. So we start working
up on the second floor or something.
Yeah, he's up on the second floor. We don't see him when we roll up, right? So, you know, the team leader's calling out, hey, go get on an elevated position over here. You know, we're going to start making an approach up here. Boom, 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 boom. And then they gave the guy the go ahead, and, you know, it's going good. We're thinking like, yo, man, where's this guy at? And then all of a sudden he pops out from, you know, one of the AC vents and just starts like laying it onto the guys on the team. Thankfully, me and another guy are on another roof. So now me and this guy are having a shootout on the roof, you know, with the sim guns. We're just shooting it off right in the training facility. And, you know, after the fact, we debriefed it, and I was like, man, that's so like real, like, because we always think of it as one way, and then our environment's always open. You know, you could have that potential, you know, gunfight on a rooftop.
Oh yeah.
But, you know, standard training is just, hey, you know, stay on the ground, don't go up, don't go down, don't do this, don't do that, don't think outside the box. And usually guys will do that without that whole stress inoculation or that force on force component, where like, hey, you're going to pay. Because like sometimes we'll use like blank AKs. When I heard those rounds go off, I was like, oh, crap. We got to find out where that's coming from. And then start triangulating on where the guy was at. So it was pretty cool because, yeah, will I ever deal with that in real life? No. But at least we know that we can start thinking outside the box under a stressful situation where there's force on force, but it's never going to replicate what real life is going to be like. You know?
Something that I appreciate about contemporary gun culture is that there is a greater faction or component of the population that is much more interested in genuine, good, and effective training. It's a lot less. There's always the meme about like the guy who has all of the quote unquote medals for all of the classes that he's taken, but he's still a, you know, fat piece of shit. Pardon my language.
You said a curse word before me, or maybe I said one before you. I don't know.
I'm a bad man.
No, I'm really trying hard not to curse. You got me, bro.
Yeah. Sinners in the hands of an angry God. But but you know what I'm talking about, right? There used to be there's kind of these stereotypes. It's like the guy who's gone to all the classes, but he's not physically fit or whatever. We're gonna push all that away again. Something that I appreciate about a lot of contemporary gun culture is there's a lot more genuine interest in like, how do I train? Who do I train with? How can I train better? Whether it's CQB, ECQC, recce, long distance shooting, whatever. So that's a good thing. Very good thing. Second part, here's the question. I think it was Cole or DJ over at GBRS Group who was talking about how one of the problems that they have, that one of the things that you don't want to do in force-on-force training is get into this mentality of like kind of playing paintball, where you've got you're using a threshold and your two guys are shooting at each other from both sides of the threshold, the doorway, and they're using the frame of the door as cover, even though we both know that it's concealment, unless you're in a Swiss house, apparently. Some dude apparently told me that Switzerland makes all their walls bulletproof. Cool. So my point being, and that one is, that's not realistic. You see this, especially in CQB, this training issue that comes up oftentimes from airsoft, but from simulation style training where people start treating a porous door frame as if it was cover. It's not. It only conceals you. Drywall does not stop bullets. And so because for the not only for the citizen, for it doesn't matter who you are, at what capacity you're training at, simunition force on force training is expensive and time consuming. You only can get so much in at a time. None of us, I don't know anybody who has the legitimate freedom to train force on force for 3 hours a day, every day. Now there are, unless you're an instructor, and then even it's a maybe, because you're still spending more time instructing than anything else. And there's a whole nother training scar that goes with that. What are some of the issues that you see in people who are beginning, or hey, they're taking their one ECQC training weekend they have this year? What are some of the things that you have identified, and you wish that you, and as soon as you see them, you're like, we got to fix this first? Because if I'm teaching a class that's force on force and two guys are shooting at each other, playing paintball on a door frame, I'm immediately stopping the rotation. You're not doing it real. You're wasting time. You're wasting time and money. You can't do that. The door frame does not stop bullets. Start over. We have to start the whole thing over because you're wasting time. I don't want you to get into the mentality of thinking that this door frame is going to stop bullets. Where do you see that happen in ECQC?
So where I see that happening is, like I explained earlier, is like that whole one shot, you get hit and it's like, I'm out. It's the same principle if you think about it, because even like you were saying, like the whole thing that, Cole and DJ were talking about, a friend of mine, Z, he was on the teams with them.
Nice.
And he has his own business, and he taught me a lot of CQB things that I thought, holy crap. He goes, each sim round to me is like a real bullet. So, if I'm going to shoot it through that threshold or whatever, I know the characteristics of what it's going to do. So if I shoot it between the crack of the door or something like that, I know that there's going to be like, hey, there's things that are going to happen with it. So I'm going to make sure that I do everything in my power to treat this as real, because I don't want to just be in that whole, standpoint where it's like, hey, I'm using this and I think I have cover, and it's not on the threshold, especially in on the domestic side here. Like, it depends on what houses you're in. Cause like, look, let's say I got a trailer park, right? Mobile home. Like, rounds go through those things like that, dude, quick. It's like, goes through and through. And you had a deputy that actually died that way in Polk County because he was standing in the back by I think a refrigerator of a trailer park, and they got into a shooting inside of the trailer, and one of the rounds went through the trailer and hit him in the side of the vest and killed him. And it's just like, dudes think that they have the cover there and all that stuff. And it's the same thing with like when we're doing the weapon-based entanglement stuff. It's like, they think that this won't happen. Like, oh, I have this new holster. It's going to retain my gun perfectly. And then you notice that a guy is able to grab it and get his finger in the gun and pop off a round, especially if it's appendix. There goes your junk or something like that. You pray that, it's cold that day and, the round just goes out real quick through the pants and not hit your junk. But it's like we live in this like false sense of security where it's here like, hey, if I tag you, you're dead. And I think it's like the whole CQB correlation that you're talking about. It's the same thing with combatives. It's like, all right, he got hit once. All right, we're done. Unless if it's like even if it's a dome shot, I still make sure that guys go through with it, and then we'll fix it after and we'll see what's wrong with it. But we're making sure that, they're doing that also, as well as like they know they're in a stressful environment. So I've had guys that they just draw right quick and just start doming the dude. And I'm like, whoa, guy didn't even attack you yet.
Okay.
Like,
yeah.
You're going to jail for that.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't want it to be like, hey, we're teaching you like how to just like kill an unarmed person or something like that. Like, there's equal armament, there's unequal armament, because like, can I deploy my weapon if I'm just fighting a dude? No. Like, if a guy pushes me, can I just smoke him on sight? No, you can't do that. It's
So
murder.
very much so. Okay, so let's break off onto let's dig into that a little bit. Um, the I'm trying to think about how to frame this better, but you're in a fight with somebody and he is unarmed, but you are armed. At what point in time would you see it justified for you to go to pulling that tool out? Like, let's use a caricatured example. You're not a police officer, you're an individual. Just a more, this is not, and no, this is not legal advice, and no, this is not, like whatever, right? Take your excuses and lawyer bullshit and go somewhere else. Sorry, I'm doing it again. But you're on the street, you start getting accosted by somebody, and and how would you describe proper escalation if they're never armed but they start winning? Go through the whole story.
Well, just think about it. Like if I'm losing consciousness
Okay.
or something's happening and, I have to deploy a tool or something, then yeah, but it's like I said, it's all dictated by the environment and what's happening. Like if you're with your yeah, it's too like it's a slippery slope you go down in, because like I could say one thing and then another thing happens. It's like you have to be in the environment to know, like, hey, this is a last resort thing that I have to go to, because either, so let's say if, for instance, a female, 5'4", 140 pounds, gets attacked by a man that's 250 pounds, and he starts trying to beat the crap out of her or rape her. Is she justified in using that tool? Like I'm asking you the question as like a normal person, the totality of circumstances. It's cut and dry.
Yeah.
Female, 5'4", 120 pounds, is getting ragdolled by a dude that's 250 pounds and is in shape, and he's beating the crap out of her, and she's starting to lose consciousness or something like that. Yeah. Is she justified in using deadly force?
There seems to be two camps. Both of them are going to say yes, but one of them is going to say yes because she has reached extreme circumstances. Another person is going to say yes because she felt threatened. And those are two different answers. And I'm curious on how you would answer it yourself.
So I'm saying that he's beating her up. Like she's getting
already
ragdolled.
Going to blows.
Yeah, she's in blows. If she just sees a dude and he goes, "Hey,"
yeah,
I can't just shoot somebody for going, "Hey."
Yeah,
fair. How do I not know the guy's like mentally handicapped or something like that, or maybe the guy's talking to somebody behind me.
Yes,
it's things like that. What I'm saying is that there is a set use there, like bodily harm is happening.
Yes, we have already passed the threshold.
We already passed the threshold of
she is physically being attacked. Yeah,
she's physically being assaulted.
Okay.
Or let's look at it another way. You're out with your family. A kidnapper grabs your kid and starts running away with your kid. Are you justified in using deadly force?
That's probably where the country, that is probably the question that will divide the morality of the country in half right there. Because many states will say no. It's somebody else's job. Like you've exported your responsibility to your family. But that's where politics and that's where politics get in the way.
So you see, it's like you don't know until you're put in that situation on when you're allowed to use that deadly force, because that's why I tell guys, it's like, hey, if you carry, know where you can carry, know where you can't carry, know your laws, especially what state you live in, things like that. A lot of people still don't know that Florida went to permitless carry. Like you don't need a permit anymore to conceal carry in Florida. They went to constitutional carry.
29 states are constitutional carry now.
Yeah,
like
so
that battle is a winning battle. And it doesn't get enough credit.
So you have that now, but a lot of people don't know that. So, it's things like that. Like you have to study this. The whole point of our curriculum, though, is to let you know, like if you get to that standpoint where you have to use deadly force in a weapon-based entanglement, where you're tangled up with somebody and you're fighting for your life, do you know how to deploy those tools within a safe manner, knowing that your rounds aren't going to inflict any pain on anybody else, around you? Because what happens in a real environment, people pull out their phones and they don't help you. They just
No,
see you
they
getting
don't.
attacked, and they pull their phones out, and they scream "World Star," and they gather around you. But yet, if you shoot one of them by accident, you're liable for it.
Do- I think I misheard something that you said, and this is I'm gonna have to go back almost and listen to it again. You said they're gonna pull out their phones, and then you said "Scream World Star." Is that
Yeah,
I?
they'll scream out "World Star" or scream out something. You know,
Okay, so I did hear that correctly. I was like,
yeah,
"What the hell did he just say?"
dude,
Scream.
I've seen it so many times. Like, dude, scream out "World Star," and they're recording it, and you're like,
What does it? What does that mean? What the hell are we talking? Like they're getting famous, insta famous.
yeah, I guess they're gonna put it on "World Star." You know, and
That's
when they pull out their phones and start recording.
good
It's
for
a
them.
trend I see, you know, or they'll be like, hey, like we got like Instagram like sites where they post things just like that, and they'll
Yeah.
be like in Miami-Dade they have called Only in Dade, so people pull out their phones and say Only in Dade, and they start taking videos of it.
Yeah. Well, that's the difference between an NPC and a real person. Really, it is like, and it's a tragedy of the modern world. But are you there to solve the problem or profit from it? And if your phone's coming out, but there's a difference there because a camera is the best tool to defeat an activist. Just record them doing something absolutely abhorrent, and then you've destroyed them.
True.
The activists have gotten so smart. This is so I want to paint a scenario for you, a little bit of an example. The year 2020, Summer of Love concept, right? Uh, Riots, violence in the streets, Minneapolis, 2021. You have people whose SOP, their standard operating procedure, is to initiate a situation, record it, edit it, and publish it. So you're not a cop in this scenario. Or you're off duty, whatever, and somebody, you are the target of the activist group, and so somebody will try to provoke a response from you, so that somebody else can record that response, so that recorded response can be clipped short, so that you don't see the initiation, but then the response is recorded and used as justification for further action. Are you familiar with this SOP?
Yeah, you don't see the full context of the whole engagement. Like we see it all the time in law enforcement as well. I've been the subject of it where they've only showed a clip of exactly everything that happened.
Yeah.
They
So
only show like a 30-second clip, and we go off of a basis of that 30-second clip.
Yep. And so I'm using this metaphor because I think the challenge I'm using this as an example because I think it's actually, unfortunately, the indicative example of our time. It's much more likely to happen to you in today's environment than someone is going to break into your house and you're going to have to do the metaphorical grab gun off the nightstand and fight him in your tidy whities kind of thing. That is regionally specific but less common. What's more likely to happen in our lives is that you're going to be accosted by an activist who's trying to get famous by instigating conflict and then becoming a victim or presenting himself as a victim over and over and over again. It's more profitable. It's basically highway robbery. There's more longevity to it, and if I can clip it, make myself famous, and then also go to court with an activist judge, I'm going to make billions of dollars off of people. I think at some point in time we're going to have to look at this kind of activity as a form of organized crime as well. But
Yeah,
I think that's
especially with AI now, it's getting crazier.
yeah, I think it's much more likely, a person is much more likely to encounter the activist trap than the metaphorical break in their house. Now, something that I've observed from developing some skill, any skill in ECQC, is that a person has multiple layers of escalation. So I'm right. It's violence is not that binary gun, no gun mentality. It's not fight or flight. There's appropriateness involved. How would you approach the activist ambush scenario?
Dude, I love it. Like you have something that's occupying your hands, which is a phone. So that's not going to kill me. and then the other hand is just probably there because usually people when they the inner limb coordination when they grab one thing they have like something else, or I could see that hand now I know this is a phone, this is definitely a phone in their hand, they're doing this,
Mm-hmm.
and then this hand like it takes the equation out. I don't have to worry about two hands, I only have to worry about one. And you know when dudes come on they just start antagonizing you, it's like you know that you possess these skills, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like that whole with great power comes great responsibility, you know.
Mm-hmm.
um, when I start seeing these antagonizers, I know their end goal is just to break me, to say something stupid. And sometimes, you know, maybe they might get a response from me. But most of the times, it's like, have you ever seen the movie Heartbreak Ridge?
I have not.
All right, so it's like an old Marine movie with Clint Eastwood. My father used to make me watch it. And I remember talking to my father one time and asking him, like, man, I'm getting fed up. I'm about to lose my shit. And I'll never forget what my dad told me. He goes, remember that movie when we watched when you were a kid? I go, yeah. He goes, don't give him the satisfaction. And
Because it.
that instantly
Okay.
just clicked something in my head. Don't give this guy the satisfaction of, you know, letting them win. Now it's another match for me. I look at it as like another match. You're trying to antagonize me. You're trying to build a reaction for me. And I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of having that reaction. Now we are human. There's going to be days where like, hey, dude, this day's just going to crap and this dude's antagonizing me. But one thing I've always felt is like I never like get physical. Like that's the one thing. But the problem is that we live in a society now where if you say something that's too harsh, they start canceling you right away or they start calling you something.
Sure, the cancel culture thing can get thrown. I mean, that is a. I'm not interested. Gosh, now I'm answering this on multiple levels at the same time. I'm not particularly interested in the whole cancel culture issue per
Uh-huh.
se. Rather, there's a certain problem. I think the certain problem that we have with cancel culture is the people who are doing the canceling are the kind of people that we probably shouldn't pay attention to anyway. Like,
Absolutely.
yeah, and a classic example of it would be like, I don't care if Ibram X. Kendi calls me racist. I don't care. I legitimately don't care. If you've got a Black Lives Matter flag in front of your house and you call somebody racist, there's no your words are empty. They have no power here. They have no value. It's basically you should be ignored. People should ignore you because you're probably illiterate and probably a racist. That's what a Black Lives Matter sign communicates to the world right now. So, adding to that and expanding on that issue, it's not the accusation of cancel culture that's the problem. I'm thinking about the morality of it. I'm thinking about what is the right thing to do. I'm thinking about also things that I can correct in my own life. One of them being, have you ever seen the movie Secondhand Lions?
No.
Okay, there's a rather famous scene. Comes up on social media every once in a while. You've got these two old guys that are like legendary. They live a quiet but auspicious life, and but they tell these stories to this. They're it's like their grandson.
Is that the
They're
one with Robert Duvall?
I'm even worse with actors
Okay.
names. I'm even worse with actors names, but I'm just gonna bring it up here on my phone. Um, it's Secondhand Lions, 2003 film. It's got no. Michael Caine, Haley Joel Osment, John Lucas, Kyra Sedgwick, Christian Kane, Adam Osberg, yeah,
Oh.
Nikki, Cat, Mark Musso. Yeah, these are the Michael Caine is probably the one of the more known characters. But my point on this is, you got these kind of two old brothers. I think they're brothers, or they might just be really good friends, and they're they're living out their old age. And
Oh yeah, yeah. It does have Robert Duvall.
okay,
Yeah, yeah. I'm looking it up right now too, because yeah, I remember watching it when I was like young.
yeah, it was a 2003
Yeah.
movie, so it's certainly not new in anything. But there's a scene where they're at like a restaurant or a bar, and these three young kids like start a fight with them. And of the two, there's Michael Caine's character, and then there's the other guy. Is that Robert Duvall?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Robert Duvall's character is kind of like this old badass, but he doesn't show it. course, the kids antagonize him, and then they all pull out knives, and Michael Caine just says, like, just don't kill them or whatever. And this old man beats these guys up completely, beats all these 4 young kids up. And I say kids, they're in their 20s, so it's not actually like child abuse. But and he's like, and then he says his line, it's like, I fought in 4 wars on 3 continents or something like that, and I've blah blah blah. I've killed men, blah 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 blah, and I've only ever loved one woman. And I think of that scene in the way that you're presenting it, and the antithesis of that scene is this activist ambush, which is, I know I've been trying to take some time to kind of build this idea out, but I wonder, and here's the problem that I'm running into, is that scene is a fantasy. When I am insecure about something, I have observed myself invent ideas on, like, well, what happens if I did this? Then people would like me more or something. And I find it really interesting that the activist ambush is predatory on that instinct. Everyone wants to be Robert Duvall. Everyone wants to be completely under assumed, whatever, and then wipe the floor with all the bad guys and go home happy, right? But the activist ambush is specifically created to take advantage, maybe by accident, maybe through some sort of social Darwinism almost, to take advantage of that desire to be the unassumed hero. But instead, it's corrupted and you're made into the bad guy. So I wonder, knowing what you know now, and having trained what you have trained now, how would you consider approaching that scene? Of course, we're not going to assume that we're in our old age, but you're at a restaurant, you're in public, somebody is clearly antagonizing you. What do you think the moral response would be? Do you think what he did was morally correct or immoral?
Is there an exit, anything like that, where I can walk away?
I mean, I'm assuming so. They could have just as well left. He could have just as well complied. Because I think the kid was like calling him names or stealing his food or something, just being an asshole. But, like, this is a moral problem that I haven't answered yet, and it bothers me.
So I've had instances like where, I've seen things that, like guys hitting on girls that, I'm not trying to be the savior, dude. I'm not here to be the savior. I'm just here to, just be Ruben, right? Mm-hmm. But there is, and if I see something immoral, I have to do something, right?
Absolutely.
But for instance, we were at a bar one time, and this guy's, and like I told you, I don't want to do the story thing, but this guy's constantly hitting on this girl, and he's just drunk, and she's not having it. Mm-hmm. So I walk over, and I'm like, hey, your friend's looking for you. She's in the bathroom. She needs you now. And she's like, oh, thanks. And then goes to the bathroom, and the guy's looking at me. I was like, hey, man, not my fault, dude. Her friend is crying for her, and she's pretty hot, so I don't want to, I'm trying to, see what's going to happen there. And he's like, oh, all right, cool. Like this big dude. And you knew he wanted to fight. Mm-hmm. But I use kind of like, it's not verbal judo. I think it's just like, after a while you just get used to like just talking to people. Yeah. As a bouncer, I never wanted to have force, because is that guy going to come back with a gun? Is this going to happen? I'd rather just use the gift of gab and talk to him. Mm-hmm. And talk to him like a normal human. I'm not bowing my chest. It's like that whole thing, that perfect example that I told you when I teach a new student, the positive, criticism, and then the positive, right? Mm-hmm. I come in there, I'm like, hey, and I make it seem like I know her. Hey, your friend's in the bathroom. She's looking for you. She's going nuts. Excuse me. Sorry for interrupting. That's why I told the guy right after rip. I'm like, you need to go check on her. She's like, oh, cool. Chick didn't know who I was. And she goes to the bathroom because she knows this guy's creeping on her. Mm-hmm. And I go, hey, man, she's got a friend. She's looking pretty good. She was asking for her. She pointed at her, and then she went back to the bathroom. I guess she's probably had too much to drink. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. I'm like, sorry about interrupting you. It looked like it was going well, but, she's got to go do that. I'm like, but go have at it. And I'll let the bouncers know, hey, this guy's like creeping on chicks. Because that's their job as bouncers, is to deal with that. Not my job. I'm not here to save anybody.
Yeah.
But it was in the proximity of where I was at. I did that. I didn't go up and like Roadhouse and sidekick the dude and look cool and all this stuff, because at the end of the day, I'm antagonizing the fight. Am I, in a legal standpoint, am I justified in doing that? No, not really.
I want to make sure we step out away from just relying on the legal system to define what is the moral.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be careful about that, because the issue, and the example being the case would be the states that require you to flee from your own home when under
Oh
duress.
yeah, no, that's
You know, like
it's
on
garbage.
it's garbage. But the thing about it's like I think that people. This is my motivation for it. I believe that people carry a gun. Most people carry a gun, and for they, let me even dial it back a little bit before even further. I think that most of the people who carry a gun in the United States do so because they believe it is they have a moral obligation to their surrounding, whether it's their social surrounding or their or immediate surrounding. Now they might enter into that part of gun culture through video games or motivation or some dirty side secret. Who cares? But ultimately, the thing that keeps people there is that they believe that they have a moral obligation to be present in their environment and look out for evildoers. It doesn't mean that they're the hero. It just means they believe there's a moral obligation. Now, there is another cast that focuses on gang violence. You know, and we're all very thankful that they're very bad at doing the violence. Let's be very clear. Like I've met my fair share of dudes on the street, little kids who think they're cool. It's like, I am very thankful that you have no idea what you're doing, but I'm not going to this is not an ego fight. It's just, it's just science. It's just Joe Biden whisper. Oops. So there is an element to that, I think.
So let's just go back on it. Like, not even from a legal standpoint. The thing is, I don't know if the guy has friends, things like that. Why am I going to put myself in such a crappy position or situation if I don't have all the chips in place or whatever?
Sure.
The thing is like, you could just talk to people.
But
like the whole.
You intervened, but it was an appropriate intervention. I don't think it was an inappropriate intervention, because again, you set the story with the guy's creeping. You helped her with no ulterior motives assumed, and you did it without creating a scene or a fight. That's a win, right?
Well, I forgot to say, like, when she was looking around, she was looking at me and my buddy, like, for help, and I'm like, all right, yes, okay. I got it, because I'm gonna. My conscience is always going to eat me away, and I'm like looking for the bouncers, and I can't find no bouncers. So I didn't really put the whole like story context in there.
Sure.
But the thing is like, man, just talk to people. Like, it goes in the whole Patrick Swayze Roadhouse thing. Be nice until it's time not to be nice.
Yeah, I believe it. De-escalation of force can be.
And I go out just to relax. I'm not going out to look for a fight or to test my skills. Maybe if you ask 18-year-old me, 18-year-old me was just wanting to scrap, prove my jiu-jitsu to everybody. 33-year-old me, I'm like, dude, I just want to have a drink with my friends, talk about life, and do this. Like, I work in a chaotic environment. I don't need chaos when I go out. That's why I don't usually go out. And and if I do, it's like, I know how to talk, and I know when my time is up and I got to leave. Because when you start seeing the influx crowd of like dudes that are going to start issues, I'm out. That's not, like, you have to know, like, that goes in that whole ego thing. It's like, I'm not going to do like a movie where I beat up 4 dudes and I'm like, all right, and then I say a badass quote right after. That's not real life.
Don't mess with Texas.
Yeah. Yeah. Or, everything's bigger in Texas, or our hands are just small. Something like that.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, I'm putting not only myself at a risk of getting beat up or something like that, because I am human, it doesn't matter, but I'm also putting the potential people I'm with at risk too.
Yeah.
So is the risk versus reward, like, is it worth it? From a moral high ground, like, if I see something's immoral, I'm going to step in and, try to diffuse it as best as I can and be the proper man my father raised me to be. But I'm not just going to be like, yeah, dude, I'm just going to sidekick this guy just to prove myself, things like that. So same thing with the antagonizers. Like, they start antagonizing me. I know that they have an end goal and they want to win, and I'm not going to let them win.
Mm-hmm.
We see it a lot. Antagonizers a lot when we're working. Dudes will just grab their phones and be like, "Yeah, what's your name and your badge number? I'll give it to you, dude. There's my name and badge number. I'm a public servant.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care. You want to go meet me at the jiu-jitsu gym and train jiu-jitsu after this? Like,
Yeah.
by all means, bro. You know, um, I got nothing to hide. It's just it's an ego thing. It's always an ego thing. When an antagonizer comes up and just starts like degrading you, it's like you don't know me, bro. You don't know me at all.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, maybe I'll just start acting like David Goggins, be like, you don't know me, son, and start banging out push-ups or something, and then play that reverse psychology on them. I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
but
There's
it's
a yeah. I think I want to stick on this beat, but I also want to change. I want to kind of like change the framework, but keep the same subject. Are you
mhm.
you tracking? Same subject, but we're talking about from you presenting conversations about law enforcement.
Same, but different.
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen that movie. I'm a movie reference guy.
I feel like I should know it, but I don't.
Good luck, Chuck.
Oh, yeah, it's been a long time. It's
Yeah.
been a long time for that one. Uh, let's go with, but this one here. So you already work in a law enforcement capacity, and my wife and I recently moved from Minneapolis to Arizona, and one of the challenges that one of the things because we go back to Minnesota somewhat regularly to visit family or various events and things like that, or whatever, right? It is sometimes to get away from the heat, but there's this problem, and Minnesota has has sort of taken this problem and applied it to the meta mindset of the population, and that is passivity. Um, after the there was the summer of love. George Floyd dies in 2020. Continues. There's like 150 buildings that are lit on fire. The third precinct burns down. We were there. We filmed it. We got to see all this stuff going on in the city and our own city. And one of the factors that sort of kind of let's call it the straw that broke the camel's back that pushed us out a little bit was the way that the city responded to what I think I'll describe as abuse. Officers quit. At one point in time, there were 2 squads running Minneapolis at night, 2 cars with 2 people. Free reign. Do whatever you want, man. And it seems like the city and the state took on a form of Stockholm syndrome, or just kind of yielded to the abuse. They're an abusive relationship. The criminality that's going on is absolutely insane. Carjackings, street robbery. It's all the same people. They're like, and it's not to even get goofily stereotypical. You know who it is. The way they dress, the way they talk, the way they walk. You're like, that's one of them. And then they go do it. It's not even like you need the stereotype. You have the evidence, right? But there seems to be this denial that, well, everyone. It's almost, and this is the foil, the counter to this conversation that we just had, which is, yeah, but you do nothing long enough and the bad people win. You see where I'm going there? You see how I'm kind of presenting this problem? Is that like I on an individual level, we can talk about certain scenarios where, yes, absolutely, the appropriate answer is to walk away. If you figured out that the person who's antagonizing you is trying to get you into an activist trap, the best thing you can't do a witty remark. There is no response. You have to play a bigger game, because they are trying to trap you in the confines of a small editable video. You have to beat them with a longer game. And the answer is, you wait until they commit an actual crime and then you arrest them for something. I don't know. I'm not going to present a solution in a metaphorical example that could go an infinite number of directions. But then the counter to that is, you see this happening all the time in cities like Minneapolis. And it's not all the time as in forever, but we were just there. And we saw a car that was clearly stolen, and a dude was driving through downtown Minneapolis like he was playing bumper cars with a stolen vehicle. All right, what is the solution to that? Everyone's saying it's not my problem, it's somebody else's problem, including the government and the law enforcement. Well, I can't do that because I got to go do something else. You have the FBI problem. I can't solve real problems because we have to go investigate Catholics in New York City or wherever, I have a problem here that's not being solved. And I think I want to hear from your perspective of law enforcement, how, maybe without giving out SOPs, how do you solve for a city that has a population that is intent on destroying itself?
Man, that's a good one, dude.
I know it's a big question. I hope I could build it up well.
It's a big question. So think about the autonomous zone that they had, where
Yes.
that thing got shut down quick. They let them do their own thing for a while, and what's the first thing that happened when the first guy got shot? Call the cops.
No.
Call the cops. Call the ambulance. And they're like, no, we're not going in there. You didn't want us.
Yep.
And sometimes you have to let people suffer from their mistakes, or their ignorance. Like they say, ignorance is bliss. It's like you don't know what you don't know, and the thing is that you see this everywhere, but you don't see it happening much in like Florida or these, I don't want to say like conservative states, but like it's just like you don't see it here in Florida because the governor doesn't play that.
Sure.
So, I can't talk for over there, but like watching on the news, it looks bad, and there has to be some form of order. There has to be order. If not, if there's no order, then what's the opposite of order? You're gonna have chaos. And what was that? Chaos.
Do you have any encouragement for someone who works in law enforcement who might be discouraged because they're constantly, the thing that's constantly in front of their eyes is the corruption from inside their own organization that isn't like cool corruption. It's just like mediocre people. I don't know. Or some, like if you were to encounter someone who was in Minneapolis SWAT or Minneapolis Police who is just downtrodden, but they're not moving away. Do you have any idea on something that you could say to encourage them?
I got nothing to say to them because I'll just look at them and be like, I've never been in your shoes. I don't
Fair.
know what it's like because my state didn't allow this to happen. So
Fair.
I can't give you any advice because I haven't gone through it. That's like a priest giving you advice on marriage when he's never been married. So for me, all I could be like is, hey man, if you need anything, I'm here. Like if you need a vent or something, or if you want to come down and become a cop here, I'll help you with that. But it's like, or I could provide, some forms of training or something like where, like if you guys need help with training or something. But as far as like, hey, like your morale and your agency, it sucks. I don't know exactly, because then I'm just contradicting because I don't know. I've never been faced with that opposition before.
Fair.
So it's crazy to see. Like I know for a fact when you watch stuff like that, it bothers you because you see it happening there and it could possibly happen here.
Yeah.
And you're just blessed enough. And one thing is like, I know a lot of people get uncomfortable with it, but man, for me, it's prayer. Like I pray to God every night and every morning. And, like I ask for, hey, because some of the stuff that you're seeing now is written in the Bible. And it's like an affirmation to me. It's like my pastor talks about all the time. He goes, we're seeing all this. It's written in the Bible and it's all happening. It's coming into fruition and you're seeing it happen right now. And it's just really solidifying what we believe in. But for me, it's like, I don't really like, I'm open about being a Christian. I'm open about my love for God and Jesus and all that. But not even from a religious standpoint, it's just like, dude, it's just sad to see. Like if you're watching it, but until it happens to you, and the way that this thing changes is when it goes to the politician's house.
Oh, so for sure. Yeah.
So how do you know new laws get enacted is when a politician's kid or some like relative gets hurt or killed. Then they're like, oh, we need to do this. For instance, look at and another thing too, is like the judges and things like that. But like, look, for instance, the Nevada man that was on trial for something, he ends up jumping the judge. Now he's getting charged to the full extent of the law. As soon as you start doing that, where you don't play with criminals, it's like if you tell a kid not to do something, like, hey, don't do that, but there's no repercussions behind it. They're just going to keep doing it because they know they could get away with it. It's a slippery slope. And what you saw there was a slippery slope. And that's why they ended up having Minneapolis has to now pay incentives for cops to get there and do that, and they're trying to double their police force, and they had to go in there with bulldozers and take out that autonomous zone and things like that because it's not working.
You had
So
Seattle. Seattle had the major autonomous zone up in the capital.
the Seattle, you see it like it all like from the news standpoint, it's like I don't even know what state it's in anymore because it's just all the same. It all just
Fair.
looks the same on the news. Like that's why I don't watch the news.
Yeah.
But like Denzel Washington said, if you watch the news, you're misinformed. If you don't watch the news, you're uninformed.
Yeah, I've heard this
So it's like,
before.
which one are you gonna pick? And you see it, but even talking to cops, like Portland cops and stuff like that, it's crazy what they're allowing criminals to get away with.
Oh no, it's pretty rough. So let's kind of close out on this subject, and let's close out on faith. Something that I've observed over the last maybe 2 years is that there seems to be a bit of, let's call it, a revival within what I'm calling gun culture. It's a little bit of a self-title, a little bit of a self-definition, but follow. Stay on, if you can, stay on course with me. How has your faith affected the way that you think about use of force? How do you, does it inspire you to become more skilled so that you may be more accurate in your use? Is it something that gives you peace, that by giving some sort of, let's call it rationalism to evil, as in, I can't explain to you why in an enlightenment mindset, why somebody would go do something as evil as rape, other than some sort of pseudo-Darwinistic survival of the fittest garbage. But in a biblical worldview, I understand it because some people hate that which is good. You cannot explain evil from a naturalistic perspective, but you can from a biblical one. And so when I witness evil and have had to engage in the use of force against evil, it was not a morally conflicting situation. Whereas for other people it was, and it left them scarred psychologically. How has your faith affected your understanding of the use of force?
My faith just it solidifies while I'm here on this earth. Like I have a purpose, and like you said, evil, and God puts people that are good to fight that evil, and I feel like that's something that I've always been raised up to do is just fight the morals. People that have like a moral standpoint in life where it's just like it's not right. Um, for me, it's like a job. So one thing is like one of my closest friends, he's a diehard Christian too, and he's on the team with me. We've had a couple of use of forces, and it's so humanizing to see that we, had a use of force with this guy, and he's in handcuffs, and then my buddy's like, "Hey, let me pray for you real quick." Like this guy just tried to hurt us, and now my buddy's praying over him. It shows the mortality we have on, knowing that we're strong in our faith and things like that. Oh, my leg just cut out.
Mine's
But
about to go. We're also running out of time.
but
So.
but it shows that hey, like we know our task and purpose in this world and what we're supposed to do, and we're not going to get too emotional over it. That we know that this is what God sent us to do. So it was humbling to see him do that a few times. So I guess, man, just for me, it solidifies my purpose in this world.
I think we've talked a bit about the subject of the ego fight. And what I mean by that, once more, is where I am vying for a feeling of status, not even status itself. A powerful person does not need to tell you that he's powerful. A famous person doesn't need to tell you that he's famous. So, a person who's skilled in the use of force doesn't need to tell you that. But the ego fight, what I'm seeing in this one, the ego battle within oneself is ultimately defeated by submitting yourself to a greater power, which just seems to be where you find your purpose, where you have found your purpose. Do I understand this correctly?
Yeah, pretty much that. Like I've, like it takes years to mature, and I wasn't always this man. I was raised up to be, I had two great parents that are both cops, one still active, and they raised me on these moral high grounds of what's bad is bad and what's good is good, and don't do anything bad, and it comes back to you. And
I know.
then,
I'm
yeah, what's
sorry.
up?
I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, you're good. What
I,
were you gonna say?
I know we've had a bit of an aversion to telling stories in this episode, but I want to close with a story or hear a story from you. Because you gave a couple of examples throughout this conversation, and you've said in your last piece that you weren't always this person, but you've grown to being that person, and you're very thankful you have parents you can look up to that you have a relationship with. You've had mentors in that sense. In yourself, if you look into your own life, in your own mind,
Mm-hmm.
first, was there, and if so, what was it like where you shifted from a self-centered mentality that was more about going to the bar, proving yourself, to here I am, send me, letting yourself go and serving a higher purpose? What was that submission process like on the inside, on your heart, in your head and your heart?
So that probably came like 2 years ago, maybe a little bit before when I became a cop. Well, I've been a cop 8 years, close to 8 years now, but for me, it's like 2 years ago, I started noticing I was getting very jaded because of the things I've saw and the job and all that. I was becoming desensitized a lot more. And then eventually, when I met my pastor, I had known my pastor for years. I never knew he was a pastor. He's a black belt in Jiu Jitsu as well. And I've known him since I was a kid. And a lot of people know me as Ruben, but the guys in the grappling scene know me as Junior, and I haven't heard Junior in years. So when I went to the church, he goes, "Hey, what's up, Junior?" And I'm like, "Hey, man, oh, it's crazy you go to this church." Like, I literally said to him, I was like, "Holy shit, you come to this church?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm the pastor." And I was like, "Whoa, this takes me back." And it reminded me of how I was when I was younger and stuff. And now I look back at it and I'm like, you have to grow. You can't, if you're the same every year, then you're just an insane person. There's no growth. So for me, it's like 2 years ago, it's like when I devoted myself to God and, got baptized and became a Christian, it really, like, I still have my issues. Like, I have, like, sometimes I'm very passionate where I'll get like angry and snap sometimes, but it's like, and not snap like go crazy, but it's like I'll pop off the mouth real quick and say something slick. And my buddy Sean's the reason why he'll check me right then and there. He goes, "You shouldn't be doing that," and vice versa. So I think 2 years ago, man, is where I started noticing that, hey, my purpose is more from God and than anything else. I've always had a sense of purpose, but this just solidified it, I think. So 2 years ago, probably, when I got baptized.
Was that a painful experience internally in your own head?
Oh, 100%. I never.
Can you describe that pain?
So I never drank. My whole life I was an athlete and I never drank. And then 2 years ago I started drinking. And at one point it got to the point where a good team leader looked at me and he goes, "Yo, man, it's not affecting your work because you're always a hard worker." He goes, "But I see something different in you and I don't like it." And I was like, "Oh," and this is a mentor I respect a lot. Like, this guy was one of my idols on the reason why I wanted to get on SWAT. So yeah, I drink now and then as like a social thing, but it's not like as heavy as I was back then. It was like I was so desensitized. I had a bad breakup, and I had some things that I saw that I was like, "Oh man, how do I cope with this?" Like, it's weird. You get desensitized. So it ended up helping me out. It was a blessing in disguise and it led me closer to God. And I did a lot of other things prior, and it just didn't fix it. And then when I went to church and got baptized, it like freed me. Like, I still have my times where I get in my little bouts and here and there. Like, I recently just posted on Instagram that, I haven't trained jiu-jitsu as much like as I used to. And I got to start making a priority to train for me, because I've noticed that I've been getting a little bit angry. Well, not angry, but like, a little bit more, not as chill. Like, I'm like, oh, because I didn't train jiu-jitsu. I didn't get to like do something. And I started noticing that my mood started changing a little bit. So I was like, let me train. And then this morning I trained, had a great training session. And now I get home, I start cleaning the house, doing everything. And now I'm on a podcast with you, and it's a great day.
I'm glad to hear.
So it's things like that you have to start checking yourself and doing and start noticing. And that's what I started noticing, is knowing when to call myself out and do stuff like that. But
Fair.
yeah, I could get in a whole tangent of it, but it stopped me from going down a spiral that would probably lead to my demise.
Well, praise the Lord, for He is good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear, man. I think I have another question that I'd love to ask, but I don't think it would be appropriate. I think it'd be better to save that one for another time,
Yeah, for sure.
because that has to do with where do you think, what extracurricular activities do you believe a police officer is morally obligated to participate in? But I'll leave you with that and the audience with that, and we'll kind of close. Does that work?
For sure.
Cool. Well, hey, where does the Redacted crew find you, whether it's through social media or your work, published, print, digital, whatever?
So social media, I have two accounts. I have my personal, which is RBJJ04. That's my personal one. And then you have my business, which is Paradox_training. Yeah, the RBJJ one is more of me sharing memes and being funny. And the Paradox one is, just the business. I keep it very strictly business on that one.
RBJJ04?
Yeah, is my personal. And then Paradox_training is the training account, my business. So
I'd love to dig into your business in a little bit, but we'll do that next time.
for sure.
Cool. Well, then that's all on Instagram. Just on Instagram? No, you're not doing you're not in a Twitter X war with any celebrities or something shit like that?
No, I got the X account, but I never go on it.
It's an interesting place.
Yeah.
So, some people see it as the arc and some people see it as hell. I guess we'll figure out. It's a weird combo, so we'll let it go.
We'll see what happens.
I know, right? Well, it's 2024. Anything is possible. But with that, for those who are still listening, again, thank you much for your time. Thank you for listening to the show. If you want to support the show, you can head over to redactedllc.com. That's where you're going to find our store. If you want to reach out to Obsidian Arms at obsidianarms.com and give their catalog a look-see, we would really appreciate that. And then and all other things, you know where to find us. You know where to join in the conversation. There's also the locals page at redactedculture.locals.com. That's you can even support us there as well. So keep the show running. This has been another episode of the Redacted Culture Cast with Ruben, and we really appreciate it, man. Thanks for coming on. We will talk to you later. All right, so in closing, go forth and conquer.